Welcome to the Civic Hub. The Civic Hub is a shared community space for grassroots and small nonprofit organizations working to make lives better for everyone in Waterloo region. Partner organizations come from a range of fields: environmental justice, democratic reform, arts and culture, anti-poverty, anti-racism, human rights, ethno-cultural and newcomer support, technology, peace and nonviolence, spirituality, and well-being. On the show, we welcome one of our partners to the Civic Hub. Today on Welcome to the Civic Hub, we have Lisette Weber and Catherine Mellinger of the Perinatal Mental Health, Inc., Together for Perinatal Mental Health, Inc.
Yes.
Yes, also known as Together Waterloo.
That's right.
Catherine, Lisette, welcome to the Civic Hub.
Thank you.
So I have a question to start with. What is perinatal? What does that mean?
So there's a lot of different opinions about what perinatal means, but for us, we talk about fertility through postpartum. So your fertility journey, your loss journeys, pregnancy, postpartum, kind of until you feel back on your feet, because I don't think you can define that really for every single person, because every pregnancy is different. Every perinatal journey is different. So the perinatal period could be as long as years? Yes. Oh, yeah. Wow, especially if you're having more than one kiddo. Yeah.
Okay. And so what does Together Waterloo do with perinatal mental health?
Yeah, so we are an incorporated, registered nonprofit that works towards sort of building bridges between community members and people who are becoming parents, people who are trying to become parents, to community organizations, to healthcare providers, and to increase the knowledge base here in Waterloo region about perinatal mental health and what that actually looks like, and having conversations with those community partners to find out how it shows up in their community, because each culture views perinatal mental health struggles very differently, and we have to be cognizant of that as we're talking to these groups as well.
Is perinatal mental health different from typical mental health?
Mm-hmm. I mean, I would argue yes, just in the fact that you're going through something while you're trying to raise children, which definitely adds a barrier to what programs you can access, what services you can get. For a lot of people, they might be on leave, they might not be working suddenly. So yeah, I would argue that yes. I mean, I think there's a lot of overlaps for sure, but there's a distinct difference between going through mental health struggles when you're an independent individual, whether you're in a partnership or a family or not, and going through that while you're trying to raise children at any stage of raising children. And I think there's a lot more intersectionalities that people need to be aware of when you're in the perinatal period and going through mental health struggles. I mean, also depending on the severity of your struggle can impact your children as well. So I would argue yes. I think there's a lot of overlaps, but for sure.
Does Together Waterloo work strictly on mitigating mental illness or in promoting mental health?
No, I think it's combined. I mean, we certainly promote mental health, but we also just really promote people understanding the differences and the intricacies and all of the intersectional things that come into play when you're dealing with mental health as a parent or somebody who's trying to become a parent. Because it's not just about being a parent. Sometimes you've been trying to be a parent for 5 years. That's a very different experience. People are going to need really different supports if they've experienced loss, if they're choosing childlessness. So yeah, I think we're mostly trying to increase advocacy more than we want to see perinatal mental health as beyond just the medical model of I have a diagnosed condition.
Okay, so this is absolute health care rather than illness remediation.
Yeah, and really you could see it as a part of the umbrella of reproductive justice. It's about proactive care and community building instead of only dealing with it when there's a problem.
Okay. And so what do you offer to people in the perinatal environment, in the perinatal time period?
Yeah, so right now we actually have a free drop-in virtual support group that happens Wednesday evenings every other week. It's a very low pressure. Come if you need it.
Right.
It's available because we're trying to really break down those barriers. I know from my own personal experience with my own postpartum depression and anxiety, there was only one support group. There was only one perinatal mental health therapist in the region. And this is like 6 years ago. So just increasing those supports and finding the different ways that people need access. Because going to a physical location isn't always possible if you're suffering from severe anxiety, and leaving your house is an issue.
Right.
And then we periodically get grants so we can run a 2S LGBTQIA plus perinatal support group. And we usually do that virtual across Ontario. We have an amazing queer therapist who steps in and helps us with that, so that somebody with lived experience is running that group who is also a parent.
So it starts off with peer support, and then, if necessary, branches off into actual therapy with a therapist.
Necessary.
Yeah, if necessary.
Right, right. And you said that you're meeting, so I assume you're meeting in the Civic Hub.
Oh, well, yeah, good point. I mean, we're meeting online in terms of the peer support group, but we do have other things that we're hoping to deliver through the Civic Hub in April in particular. So, yeah, it's expanding beyond that for sure. In terms
So
of
everything's available online?
Yes, everything's available online, and we also partner with other organizations. We call them sort of knowledge exchanges.
Okay.
Because part of what we want to do is not just increase people's awareness of perinatal mental health if you're in the community and you're a parent, but also organizations who support families to have an increased amount of knowledge of what perinatal mental health is, what perinatal mood and anxiety disorders are, and also just all of the, understanding like how impossible parenting feels.
Yes.
Understanding how different communities feel surveilled in their parenting journeys in different ways. Understand the constructs that people have of their own expectations of themselves as parents, and how that can even increase their anxiety. So that's really the two main facets of what we're focusing on right now, is increasing peer supports on the ground, but then also really increasing awareness and education in the community as well.
Right, right. When the need for therapy is identified, does that require a medical referral to a therapist?
No, people can usually self-refer to therapists, but it really, again, depends on what your barriers are to accessing those services. So if you need your services to be OHIP covered, for example, or if you need access to a psychiatrist along your journey, then you would have to go through your family healthcare provider. And then we're talking about barriers of whether somebody has a family healthcare provider or not that has that referral stream. So depending on where you sit socially in the community, you can also self-refer, find somebody. We're working a lot more with organizations who offer parenting groups, parenting meetups, where that could potentially be a place that people can go as their first step to saying that they're not doing okay.
Okay.
So there's a lot of different pathways in, and that's sort of what we're also trying to help people understand in the community, is that it's not one straight line. And often it's just really not clear, like how people go about finding the support they need.
I can see people saying to themselves, "Oh, I don't need that. I'm mentally healthy." What do you recommend for people that think they don't need your services yet?
I mean, we're not going to force anyone, but
No. I think the biggest indicator for a parent, if they're trying to determine where they are on the scale of okay and not okay, is generally just that, like, feeling that things aren't going the way that you thought that they would. Because we all go into parenting, we all go into pregnancy with this imaginative, like, unicorns, rainbows, everything's going to be beautiful. You're going to have the birth you want. Your postpartum is going to be great. Like, the baby's going to latch right away. That's not the reality for most people. There's usually something along the way that's a bump. And if after 2 weeks of feeling kind of down, you're not really feeling back to yourself, if things that you used to like are no longer really interesting, if everything just feels slow and heavy all the time, or alternatively can feel like really fast and really kind of hyper because you're like just hyper vigilant, those are kind of indicators of maybe you should just talk to somebody. We're not talking about you need to go talk to your family doctor, or you don't need to go talk to a therapist. talk to your friend, talk to your partner, talk to your parent, and just say, you know what, this isn't what I thought it was going to be like. And just having that person to kind of say, yeah, this is hard and you're doing hard work. And acknowledging that for you is just, it can be so transformative.
Yeah. So you're advocating that the entire community pitch in to provide the mental health support.
Yes, exactly. So even if people don't feel like they need us, just being aware of us because they have a friend that they're worried about, that's part of it too, right? It's just increasing everyone's awareness so that you can say something feels off when I hang out with my friend. What do I do about that? Well, call us and we can figure it out with you. We can figure it out based on your friend's intersectional experience, what their family makeup is like, what they've been through. Like, we're really a story-centered organization. We want to know, we're not just going to say like, oh yeah, it's a clear path forward. It's like, okay, tell us about who you are and what you're dealing with. Tell us about what those barriers are. Tell us what your hunches are. We mostly just want to, increase the community and have people rally around each other again.
Right.
Yeah.
Noticed that, years ago when my son was in the perinatal period, a lot of criticism, a lot of people saying, you're not doing it right. Do you find that still to be the case today? I mean, this is 30 years later.
Oh yeah, it's definitely the case. What we talk about is like this culture of impossible parenting. It's just like all these values that society kind of holds on to about, you invest up front to reap rewards later. You like make yourself exhausted, making sure that your kid does all of the right things. You go completely natural with everything. You, it's just there's this idea that like we have to be all for all of the things, all the different pieces of parenting, when in reality, some of that is just not achievable for most people. There's so many intersections that people don't take into consideration when you see a parent struggle. Are they struggling because of their mental health, or is their mental health struggling because they're also precariously housed, can't find, like, struggling with food, can't pay for formula, diapers? Like, there's all these different intersections, and it's not necessarily mental health,
Right.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, you're not struggling with mental health, you're just struggling to know if you have a safe place to sleep tonight.
Right. But that can lead to mental illness outcomes.
Yes.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I think also we're still really stuck as a society on this sort of categorization. If anything, it's gotten worse, where it's like, what kind of parent are you? Like, you're supposed to be able to identify and label yourself as a parent. Are you a cloth diaper parent? Are you a reusable diaper parent? Are you a formula feeding parent? Are you a nursing parent? Are you a body feeding parent? Like, we've become very hyper compartmentalized in needing to identify ourselves as parents instead of just being a parent.
Right.
And everything that is not included in that is like, who is your kid? Like, we've taken away this ability to just be in relationship with our children by saying like, well, I'm going to decide to do this because I want to be this parent. And it's really causing a lot of harm. I mean, really, it keeps us centered in this like very ableist perspective, a very heteronormative perspective, a very discriminatory perspective of like, each parent's different, each kid is different, every relationship at birth or even before birth, like, everything is individual. And we've become this society that wants to say, oh, well, you're this kind of parent. And so this expectation is like, well, where do you fit? And if you don't feel like you fit in those categories, you're an outsider.
It seems like one of the keys to perinatal mental health is resetting the norms. Don't do what society expects you to do. Do
Very
what
much
feels
so.
right to you, the parent.
Yeah, exactly. And redefine it for yourself so that it's centered on you and your family instead of this expectation of everything that people are telling you from outside.
Right. You said that this is available to 2S LGBTQIA parents as well. Does that imply that it's cross-gender all the way? Like, dads are welcome to perinatal mental health sessions too?
Yes, and in that group specifically, we're certainly open. Like, participants that we've had in that group are on a multiple, like, they sort of range. So we've had people who identify as non-binary, who identify as trans, lesbian, bisexual. They're in all different forms of relationships. We also have had people in the group who have come with their partners as well. And it's really talking about like, what part of my experience is really being driven by this heteronormative idea of becoming a parent that I actually am really struggling with that in terms of being seen as who I am.
Right.
So yeah, we've had great diversity in that group with a lot of different intersections as well. And partners have been welcome for sure.
Good, good. I was thinking back to the days when I was a young parent, and my wife attended the La Leche League meetings, where dads were not welcome. So, you know, dads would gather off in the den while the mums were off by themselves. And so it didn't seem like it was an across the board group of peer support. Yeah.
Yeah. It's definitely becoming something that some therapists locally are focusing on. They're running a lot more groups where, like, specifically for partners. That is like a hope and dream for us. We're like a year and a half into being a nonprofit, and so funding is always our question. Yes. And like we have all these thoughts and plans and dreams, and definitely looking at that statistic of like parents or like male identifying partners who are affected, because the statistic that gets used is 1 in 10. So and
that 1 in 10 statistic applies to the mothers,
to the male identifying partners.
Okay.
Yeah. And also that doesn't capture so many partners, right? Like to identify that also doesn't capture a lot of parents, like postpartum support or perinatal support, if we look at how it's presented in our Western society, and I would even argue very much globally, like we're talking about a very heteronormative construct, right? Yeah. So we're talking about women who are giving birth, right?
Right.
So we're excluding women who don't give birth. We're also excluding people who don't identify as female who give birth. And then even in this construct of like partners, very much is advertised as like dads, right? So immediately it's like, okay, well, I'm not a male identifying person. And if I'm a gay father who adopted my child, am I allowed here? So there's a lot of people who are excluded from that in terms of looking at like, there's a multiplicity of identities in parenting. There's a multiplicity of ways in which people become parents. And we finally also have, I mean, not to get kind of nerdy, but we have the neuroscience now that supports that it's not just a person with a uterus who gives birth who goes through brain changes, right, neurologically. So that's why we're seeing partners, non-birthing parents, foster parents. Like we're seeing so many people struggle because it's not just somebody who gives birth.
So you include in perinatal all the different forms of acquiring new members in your family.
Exactly. And it's beautiful to see more people supporting partners or even changing the language around dads and partners, but it's also pushing even farther than that and saying, well, okay, what if I'm a partner of someone who adopted, but I'm still struggling? And also just understanding that for some partners, their struggle is coming from watching their partner struggle, right? So it's also a relational dynamic in terms of what is happening in that family unit, that if one person is struggling, you're that much more at risk of also struggling yourself by watching that person struggle.
Right. So you said that you've been a nonprofit for, what, a year and a half?
Yeah, it's been a year and a half now, yeah.
And how did you get into the Civic Hub?
Oh, do you want to say?
I think Civic Hub was just something mentioned by one of our board members who just said it might be a great networking opportunity for us, which is completely true. That's sort of we sort of have the two places where we see Civic Hub helping us out and like how we can help, as well as just the networking opportunities that Civic Hub does offer. The fact that there's like an email that you can email everybody when something big is happening, or if you need like answers to questions, or and like in April we actually have a perinatal mental health foundations training happening at the Civic Hub, which is going to be great because now we have this location. We don't have to pay a rental fee. We don't have to pay for AV equipment. There's not all these additional costs that we honestly can't afford.
You get the infrastructure.
Yeah, you
as
get
part of
like the
Civic Hub.
support and just like other people rooting for you also.
Right.
We're also at that grassroots level that are just like, yeah, this is hard. How can we help each other? And how can we just like grow the awareness that grassroots also need funding
Yes.
and awareness
Yeah.
and support.
When you've been at the Civic Hub, have you found some sort of synergy with the other groups that are members of the Civic Hub as well?
Yeah, I mean, most definitely. We were connected to the Civic Hub by a board member who belongs to the Civic Hub. Fadila, who's the
Fadila.
ED of the African
Yeah.
Women's Alliance, was really the one that sent us over. And part of why she recommended it was because, like, you need other people who understand what you're trying to do. You know,
Yes.
not just as an organization, but like as a grassroots organization. So yeah, there's been this sort of like, oh, we're understood here. Like the amount of work that is into this, the amount of passion that's required, the fact that you're in this group of organizations that are all doing what they do because they know they can create change. Like just that is an amazing holding space, and it
Right.
just keeps us going, gives us energy.
Right. And now that you're a member of the Civic Hub, have you found that it's increased your reach in the community?
Yeah, I would say that we've connected with a lot more grassroots that we can sort of just look on the Civic Hub website, and then through that list we can then find the other organizations that those organizations partner with.
Right.
So we've definitely met a good number of people and just become that much more aware ourselves of all of the really amazing grassroots work that's happening. And because we want to be very aware of intersections of perinatal mental health, like this is something we've often talked to before, is like an organization that supports housing or food security, like those are of interest to us, because if you have precarious housing, if you have food insecurity, you're at higher risk of having a struggle in the perinatal period. So it's allowing us to also see how what we do connects to what everyone else is doing as
Right.
well.
Right. For people who find themselves in a perinatal situation, how can they get a hold of Together Waterloo?
So we have a website,
Mhm.
togetherwaterloo.ca. Everything is on there. It's from our support groups, education pieces. I mean, we just finished working with the Waterloo Region Suicide Prevention Council to create sort of some information around suicide in the perinatal period. So we're slowly like building that, making it a bit more accessible with all the information. We're also on social media, Facebook and Instagram. It's just at Together Waterloo. And that's kind of where we keep up to date with everything and posting like what's coming up and all the different stuff
Right.
that's going on. And this year is probably our biggest year of things happening.
Right. When you get back to the office, what is it that you're going to do next?
Today. We're actually in the middle of planning a conference where it's called Perinatal Mental Health in the Margins, and it's specifically looking at people in Waterloo Region who are working with the parents in those places that are often neglected through social supports, through the bigger organizations. So we have panels, discussions around peer support and why that's so important. Our keynote is the Black Birth Project, and they're going to come and talk about why racialized birthing data is important, because Canada doesn't collect that at all.
Really?
Yeah, so from what we know with the States knows that like if you identify as a Black birthing parent, your mortality rate is a lot higher than a white birthing parent.
Right.
So we can like be comparable to that, but we don't actually have those physical statistics, and without those statistics, change can't happen.
Right.
We're hustling. We're doing a lot. So like there's just all these different intersectional pieces that we're really looking at. Like there's going to be a precariously housed parenting panel. Like there's just all this great stuff that's going to happen, and we're really hoping that we're reaching like the healthcare providers, the nursing staff, community organizations that just support families, and just try to get them all in one place and try to open those conversations of let's stop looking at the heteronormative model.
Right.
Let's stop assuming everybody feels secure in their living situation. how do we support people better?
Right. That seems to be the biggest aha to me, is that this is so cross-gender. That's so wide a net that you're casting.
Yeah, and very cross-cultural too, right? Because
Yeah.
when we think about, I think the conversations are finally starting around mental health in general, that not every culture, every culture sees mental health differently, talks about mental health differently, has an acceptance or a non-acceptance of mental health struggles. And so, yeah, it's really casting that net wide and saying, like, if it's hard for a culture to talk about mental health, then how much harder is it going to be to talk about struggling as a parent, right? So,
Right.
like, what is the role of a parent in different cultures? What are the expectations of parenting in different cultures, in different races, in different genders? And how does that affect then how easy it is for you to achieve those expectations, or even be able to talk about not feeling like you are, or not being able to talk about the fact that, like, you're having these really awful and true thoughts and you can't tell anybody about it because it would just mean a disrespect to your parents, for example, or it would mean that something is awfully wrong with you. So yeah, I think casting the net wide is really, that's our focus, is like, let's break this open a little bit.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, Catherine Mellinger and Lisette Weber of Together Waterloo, thank you so much for coming in and talking to me today.
Thank you for having us.
You're very welcome. Welcome to the Civic Hub.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Welcome to the Civic Hub, where we welcome community partners to the Civic Hub. The Civic Hub is online at civichubwr.org. You can reach the Civic Hub by email at civichub@waterlooregion.org. Welcome to the Civic Hub is produced at the studio of CKMS-FM 102.7 Radio Waterloo. The show is sponsored by the Social Development Center of Waterloo Region. The executive producer is Alexander Petrovich. Ritika Sharmali is the producer and host, and I'm Bob Jonkman. Civic Hub is supported by the Region of Waterloo Upstream Fund. The theme music is A Good Bass by Kumiko from the Free Music Archive and used under Creative Commons CC0 license.